Organisational culture. It's a funny old term, that. Now, most of us have some concept of what culture is in our organisations. And most leaders accept that in order to be more responsive, more adaptive, more innovative, in order to create business agility, organisations almost always need to evolve their culture, to adapt it to something more aligned. The question is, how on earth do we do that? Well, stick around. I got you covered, because in this video, I'm going to be talking about 5 ways that leaders can create the environment for culture change in their organization. Welcome back, my friends. I'm Karim.harbott, and I'm here as ever talking all things business agility and innovation. Today, we talk about how we shift our culture in an organization. You know, it's really easy to say we need to change our culture, right? But it's not as if you can just walk up to the culture shop and say, I'll have that one please, and then install it like you would an operating system on a computer. In fact, that would be awesome if you could do that, but you can't. So we are stuck with trying to work out how to do that ourselves. Well, over the years, I've seen many attempts, and some have been successful, most have not. And for me, there are things that I've noticed, and I'd like to share those with you today. Before we start, please feel free to subscribe to my channel, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff in the comments that might be of interest to you. So anything we talk about in this video will go down in there. So check those out. And if you enjoy the video, a like goes a long way. So culture change. Culture is one of those strange things that is not directly changeable. It is an emergent property of your organization. And the way I like to look at it is like a shadow on the wall. If you have a shadow on the wall, now you don't get to change that shadow directly. If you want that shadow to change, you have to change the things that cause the shadow. That is the light source or the object in front of the light source. And once you change those, a new shadow will emerge. And that's really how we need to go about culture change in our organizations. There are many definitions of culture, but for me, it's the underlying values, beliefs, and stories that we tell ourselves in the organization. It's what allows us to know what to do when there are no rules to tell us what to do. It's incredibly powerful, and it's incredibly difficult to understand. One of the most important drivers of culture is how people in the organization behave. What are the actions people are taking day to day? What are the stories people are telling themselves and telling each other? Now, if we can get these behaviors to change, then a new culture can emerge. But guess what? Again, you don't get to directly change the behavior of the people in the organization. You can't go and say, you must behave like this. All you can do as leaders is to manage the inputs. And there are, for me, 5 levers that you have under your direct control that will influence the behaviors of the people in your organization. That will influence the ultimate culture that emerges in your organization. But you need to be clear on what your culture is, and you need to be clear on what you would like your culture to be before you can consciously make changes to those 5 levers, which will hopefully allow you to arrive at the culture that you desire. So let's dive into those 5 levers now. The first lever is your structures in your organization. This is the hard architecture, how you put your teams together. You can put people in functional silos and make it incredibly difficult for them to talk to people in other functions. Or you can put people together in a more cross-functional environment where they can interact and collaborate and cooperate together. Now, if you want innovation and if you want responsiveness, then having people in a place where they can collaborate with each other will make the culture far more collaborative, and it will make people far more likely to communicate and cooperate. So how you put those teams together is incredibly important, and that goes back to your organizational structure. Innovation typically requires self-managing, cross-functional teams that are able to make fast and frequent decisions based on the learning. And they also involve a high level of cooperation and collaboration, both within the team, across teams if you have a network of teams, and of course with that all-important customer. The second of our 5 levers is policies. Now, there are many policies in your organizations, some of which will govern your dress code, your expenses, your holidays, some of which will govern how you invest money, what experiments people are allowed to run. This is about the rules that tell you what is acceptable and what is not acceptable in your organization. If you change the rules, you will get a change in behavior. For example, policies like 15% experimentation time. You can take work time to run with an experiment about which you are passionate. That is a policy that an organization can have or more likely not have. And that's going to have a big impact on people's experimentation and collaboration in the long run. So if you want to create a culture of collaboration and experimentation, you have to put those policies in place. Other policies will involve giving people more freedom and trusting people such that they feel more engaged in your organization. There are so many ways you can do that, but the policies, the rules of your organization are an important factor for how people behave. The third policy is incentives. What we incentivize, we tend to get. What is it that you require people to do in order to get promotions, in order to progress, in order to get bonuses? These are the things that people will focus on. So if you're incentivizing individualism, you will get individualism. We are rational humans. If we incentivize cooperation and collaboration and teamwork and experimentation and bringing new products to market, we will get that. So we need to be extremely careful about what we incentivize, and we need to have some idea of what the effect on our culture will be if the behaviors move to be aligned with those incentives. And by the way, we want individual, team, and organizational incentives to be aligned. That's a tricky thing to get right. The fourth of our 5 levers for behavioral and therefore culture change in our organization is metrics. The good old metrics. Now, we could talk about metrics all day, but I promise you I won't, because I'd fear you would be clicking away from this video in droves. What I will say though is that we tend to measure what we value. So when you look at the set of metrics in an organization, it gives a real clue into what the leadership of that organization value. And they can say all day long that they value cooperation, collaboration, experimentation, trust, but if they're measuring things like efficiency and utilization and the number of defects, and they're seeking to drive those down, that's going to tell a different story. And what's going to be listened to is the metric and the incentive, not the words. Our final of the 5 levers is leadership behaviors. Now, I think this is the most powerful one, because you can use all of the words you like, but your behaviors are far more impactful and far more powerful. For example, talking about the fact that we have a safe to fail environment and you can try things and it's okay if you make mistakes is wonderful. These are great words. But if the actions of leaders are to berate people that make mistakes and to never admit to any mistakes you make, then that's going to send a far more powerful message than any words that you put out there. So you need to think about how you show up every single day as leaders. It is not something other people do. This is something you have to live and breathe, because people take their cue from the senior leadership of the organization, and your behaviors will massively influence the behaviors of others. Now, a small example of this is quite often when people remove the cap on vacation days, on holiday days that you can take, we see that people take fewer days. Because when there's a bar of 20 days, well, I'll take my 20 days. When the bar goes, I don't know what's okay. So I'm just going to play it safe and maybe take 16 or 17 days. They found this at Netflix too. The way that they got over this situation was for the senior leadership in the organization to take more holiday days than they did before, and to be very, very vocal about talking about the holidays they've been on. This sent the message that it's okay, that it's expected that people take downtime. And this sent the message that others should do it too. And once that change happened, people started taking holiday, and it became the norm, and that was how they operated, and it became rolled up in the culture of the organization. So how you show up is incredibly important. So there we are, 5 levers that you have under your direct control as senior leaders: structures, policies, incentives, metrics, and your own leadership behaviors are an incredible, powerful combination if you want to shape the kinds of behaviors and activities in your organization, and ultimately a new culture will emerge. Now, you won't get it right first time. You'll try some things, behaviors will change, maybe a culture that isn't ideal emerges. You will have to experiment and you will have to come back to it. That's to be expected. Culture is not a machine, it's not predictable. You will have to try things, but you will get there as long as you consciously think about it. That's all from me, folks. Remember, please subscribe if you want to hear my next videos, which will be out in the next week or 2. I'll be talking about some of the concepts from my book, The 6 Enablers of Business Agility, as well as many, many other things around the business agility and innovation space. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. You will hear from me very soon. Until then, have a great week, folks.